Lieutenant Governor Rachel Hunt. North Carolina State Senator Bradley Overcash. North Carolina Representative Donnie Loftus. Mayor Bellflowers and Mrs. Bellflowers of Hope Mills, North Carolina. Diane Watts, daughter of Private First Class Bragg. Melissa Milliken, granddaughter of Private First Class Bragg, accompanied by spouse Nathan Milliken and children Landon Watts, Tristan Milliken, and Iridessa Milliken. Catherine Watts, granddaughter of Private First Class Bragg, accompanied by spouse Jason Pelletieri. Jennifer Bell, granddaughter of Private First Class Bragg, accompanied by children Garrett and Gwyneth Bell. Rebecca Amapour, granddaughter of Private First Class Amapour, and children Nathan and Dylan Amapour. Amy Redinger, granddaughter of Private First Class spouse Christopher Redinger, and children Anara and Cordelia Redinger. Brian French, grandson of Private First Class Bragg. Benjamin French, grandson of Private First Class Bragg, accompanied by spouse Sherry French and daughter Avery French. Command General, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Jonathan Braga and Mrs. Braga. North Carolina Civilian Aid to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. Blair Schwedo, North Carolina Civilian Aid to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. Grayson Overholt, from the office of Senator Tom Tillis. Director, Sergeant Major Retired Rick Long, representing Secretary Jocelyn Millette, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. And from the A2nd Airborne Division Command Team, Major General James Pat Work and Mrs. Work, and Command Sergeant Major Randolph Delapina and Mrs. Delapina. The color guard for today's ceremony is provided by the Fort Bragg Sergeant Audie Murphy Club. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for honors to Lieutenant General Anderson. Today's salute is being fired by Alpha Battery, 3rd Battalion, 319th Airborne Field Artillery Regiment, the Apex Battery, commanded by 1st Lieutenant Timothy Carter and Staff Sergeant Christian Villafana. Please remain standing for honors to the nation and the invocation, which will be delivered by the Fort Liberty Garrison Chaplain, Colonel J. Uden.
I invite you to pray with me. Almighty and gracious God, it is with gratitude that we come before you this day as we rename this installation. Named after a soldier, a paratrooper whose valor, devotion to duty, and true grit rose to meet immense challenges on the battlefield's 80 who serve here in the future display. May your blessing be upon this place. And may
At this time, Captain Laura M. from Alpha Battery, 3rd Battalion of the 319th Airborne Field Artillery Regiment is presenting Mrs. Diane Watts with the last fired from today's salute battery in recognition of her father's service and dedication. Today, we are gathered to witness the historic redesignation of Fort Liberty, North Carolina to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. At this time, the host for today's ceremony, Lieutenant General Anderson, accompanied by Command Sergeant Major Barker, Colonel Mixon, and Command Sergeant Major Scott, will conduct the official casing of the Fort Liberty garrison colors for the last time and the uncasing of the Fort Bragg colors. The very heart of a unit is symbolized by the colors under which the troops serve. The colors stand as a silent reminder of the past glories and traditions, lend inspiration like a guiding beacon into the future. The essence of the tradition, honor, respect, and sacrifice. Tradition holds that the colors lead the unit into battle, emphasized by the regulation containing instructions to the color bearers, which states, when in action, resolve not to part with the colors, but with your life. Just like the casing, the uncasing ceremony is a simple event, rich with tradition and heritage. It defines a point in time to commemorate the beginning or continuation of a unit's history along with a lineage by carrying on the finest of traditions of the United States Army. Fort Liberty, Installation Code 37225, is redesignated as Fort Bragg in accordance with the Secretary of Defense, Title 10, United States Code, Section 113. I direct the Army to change the name of Fort Liberty, North Carolina to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in honor of Private First Class Roland L. Bragg. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Gregory K. Anderson.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, soldiers, families, and honored guests, thank you for being here today. It's a great day for our Army and our community. To our Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Dan Driscoll, our senior official performing the duties of Undersecretary of the Army, Mr. David Fitzgerald, to the Commanding General of the United States Army Forces Command, General Pappas and Command Sergeant Major Holland, to our dear leaders and friends from across North Carolina, Senator Budd, Congressman Hudson, Congressman Harrigan, Lieutenant Governor Hunt, State Senator Overcash, State Representative Loftus, and Mayor and Mrs. Bellflowers. I'm grateful to you all for your leadership and service and for honoring us today with your presence. To the wonderful family of Private First Class Roland Bragg, it has been great to get to know you and to have you here after traveling from every corner of this nation. You have made this event truly special for everyone. Thank you. Today, we gather on an installation that is the largest in our Army per capita, covering 164,000 acres, supporting over 48,000 soldiers, 80,000 family members, 2,000 Department of Defense civilians, and nearly 100,000 retirees and their families. It is home to our Forces Command and Army Reserve Command. It is home to the 18th Airborne Corps, the Joint Special Operations Command, the United States Army Special Operations Command, the 82nd Airborne Division, and much more. Fort Bragg is just not any base. It is our nation's premier force projection platform. It is a culture of toughness and warfighting, and it is a way of life. We refer to deploy without warning anywhere across the globe, to help and assist others, to respond to crises, to deter conflict, and if necessary, to fight and win our nation's wars. For over 100 years, our citizens have come here from every corner of the nation, every walk of life, to serve others, to live with noble purpose, and to challenge themselves to become the nation's warriors. Fort Bragg is a place where ordinary people transform into heroes. Ordinary people like Private First Class Roland L. Bragg. PFC Bragg came from humble beginnings. His story embodies the greatest generation. Born in Webster, Maine in 1923, he came of age in the depths of the Great Depression, selling vegetables from the family farm and working alongside his brother at his father's auto salvage yard. In July of 1943, Bragg enlisted in the Army, and after earning his jump wings, he was assigned to the 513th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 17th Airborne Division, 18th Airborne Corps, and he trained right here in the pine forests of Fort Bragg. Soon he was off to the European theater of World War II, and on a bitter cold January morning, outside of Bastogne, Belgium, as the Battle Bulge raged, he would put that training to test. The 17th Airborne, or the Golden Town Division, was engaged in a fierce battle for a critical piece of terrain. During that fighting, Private First Class Bragg was wounded and taken prisoner along with 4 other paratroopers. They were subsequently taken to a German aid station behind enemy lines. While he was there, PFC Bragg learned that his German captor and another American paratrooper were both Freemasons. They somehow convinced the German guard to let the prisoners go, but only if Private First Class Bragg first knocked the German guard out with a rifle, so it looked like he struggled. Wounded as he was, PFC Bragg was more than happy to oblige. As well as he took the German soldier's uniform and then he commandeered a German ambulance nearby. Bragg then loaded the wounded paratroopers into the truck and began a race back to the American lines under intense fire. Fire which he actually believed had killed the wounded paratroopers in the back of the ambulance that he had tried to save. It was for this action that PFC Bragg earned the Silver Star, the 3rd highest military decoration for valor in combat. He was a hero. But we can only imagine the burden he carried for years, believing he had let his fellow paratroopers down. Roland Bragg married his wife Barbara in 1946, and together they raised 3 daughters, Linda, Deborah, and of course Diane, who we are honored to have with us here today. Diane, could you please stand up so we can see you? Thank you. With his family by his side, he enjoyed the long peace which his generation fought so hard to secure. Bragg rarely spoke of his service, and for nearly 50 years he continued to believe he was the sole survivor of the desperate flight from captivity in the Ardennes. But his Army story didn't end there. As the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Bulge approached, John Martz, a fellow member of the 17th Airborne Division, was reflecting on his own wartime experience. John, too, had been wounded in the battle near Bastogne and found himself in a barn 20 miles behind the German lines. Someone, a nameless paratrooper, had loaded him and 3 others into an ambulance and drove them to safety. John Martz began writing letters to surviving members of his division, searching for the man who had saved his life. One of those letters was sent to Private First Class Bragg. Quote, "I remember sitting at the kitchen table reading that letter," Bragg told a California paper, "and chills went up and down my spine." Soon after reading the letter, Roland traveled to California and was reunited with the paratrooper whose life he had saved. 2 ordinary men, bound by an extraordinary moment, found each other across the decades. This reunion wasn't just a footnote in Roland's story. It was and stands as a testament to the bonds forged here in this place, bonds that many who have trained and served here would immediately recognize and feel. From the pine forest where Roland trained to the battlefields of today, Fort Bragg has carried that spirit forward, shaping warriors who have answered the call across the years. Over 80 years have passed since Roland Bragg arrived here. 8 decades of soldiers from Fort Bragg deploying to every major conflict, defending America and her allies across the globe. And they come home to Fort Bragg. For some, it may be more. It may be home for just a few months, and for others, a lifetime. But this place is more than a military stronghold. If it were a city, this 260,000 strong person community would make it the 5th largest in North Carolina. Its economic impact, over $8 billion annually, fuels jobs, businesses, and growth in Fayetteville and across Cumberland County. Our soldiers, our spouses, and veterans are seamlessly intertwined in this community. Teachers in our schools, nurses in our hospitals, students at Fayetteville State and other institutions of higher education. These community ties and partnerships have bound us together across generations and form a collective pride and reverence for this place we honor today. Today we salute a man who answered the call, came to North Carolina, and forged the best version of himself. And so today we honor a hero worthy of the name Bragg. It is synonymous with excellence. It is the home of airborne and special operations forces. When the nation needs to project power on short notice, the first call comes to Fort Bragg. When that call comes, we answer with speed and overwhelming force, and if necessary, we will fight and prevail. Just down the street, about 500 meters off to my right, stands a statue. We call him Iron Mike, but the official name is the Airborne Trooper. It's not a statue of a particular person, but a mirror reflecting the potential of every soldier who passes through these gates. Roland Bragg didn't arrive here a hero. Shaped in the crucible of Bragg's training grounds and in the battlefields, he became one. So Iron Mike stands as proof of that promise. The nameless airborne trooper, a quiet hero reflecting not just who we are, but who we can become. And it has been my experience that this place and our nation and our Army are chock full of people like Roland Bragg. Fort Bragg is where soldiers transform, where the ordinary find the extraordinary, and where the call finds its answer, where a quiet man from Maine emerges a hero. In his honor and in the shared legacy of all who have called this place home, we answer the call. Welcome back to Bragg. May this place continue to forge heroes for our nation. Airborne, all the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, the granddaughter of Private First Class Roland L. Bragg. Miss-
Good morning, everybody. Reflecting on memories of my grandparents and the question on naming announcement, who is Roland L. Bragg? Well, let me tell you, he was a loving and devoted husband, father, and grandfather. He was a provider. He was a pillar of our small community in Nobleboro, Maine, and a philanthropist that did not seek recognition for his generosity. Even his own family did not know the full extent of his generosity until after he was gone. He liked to joke around. He didn't take things too seriously, and he was extraordinarily curious about everything. He loved new technology and wanted to know how things worked, and I remember him being particularly tickled when VHS movie cameras came out. I can only imagine what he would think of the technology we have now. I never saw my granddad wear his military uniform. He was not one to go to a Memorial Day parade or a Veterans Day parade. Even one Memorial Day when I was marching in a parade in our town, he was working. The uniform I knew him to wear were green and blue Dickies work clothes, a t-shirt, and later in life, suspenders. And he had a big heart. He was strong, hardworking, and proud. My grandpa, as you've heard, was a Depression-era kid. He grew up with very little, and he is definitely a member of what I think we all know and understand to be the greatest generation. He saved everything and anything that had any value or could be reused or salvaged in any way, and he put those salvage efforts to good use in many projects over the years. My grandfather was a stable force in my life. My grandparents' home was a second home to my sister Jennifer and I. We grew up in the same small town of Nobleboro, Maine, and we were at our grandparents' home a lot. I have a lot of really great memories of my granddad, playing checkers with him and him never letting me win. And I literally never won. He would make pancakes for us, and I know this was a tradition he did for his own children. He carried it on to his grandchildren, and he would take special requests, any shape you wanted. If it was a bunny or a bear, didn't matter. You want a leaf, he'll make it for you. I had a lot of fun going on outings with him. He loved to go to air shows and car shows and antiquing. And I got to go looking at jobs with him when he ran his building moving business. I remember climbing under buildings, learning about foundations and heavy equipment, construction, hydraulics, and learning negotiation and people skills from observing my grandfather and how he dealt with people around him, including his customers. One of my favorite jobs that we looked at together was out in Vinyl Haven, which is a small island off Mid-Coast, Maine. And it was out to the island. My granddad also provided encouragement for us to do well in school and rewarded each A with $1, which may not sound like much today, but in the 1980s, I assure you it was much appreciated. He was a very hard worker, almost to a fault. He was a man of many talents, a jack of all trades, and if something needed to be done, he would figure out how to do it. I remember him building cottages, salvaging buildings or items within them, moving buildings, operating and working on heavy equipment, welding, vehicles, working on and building a retaining wall for the home which we affectionately called the brick house had intended on moving into when they downsized, although they never did move into that home. He never talked about his time in World War II with me. I loved history and was curious about it, and I discussed it with my grandmother a number of times. And I feel very blessed. You heard a moment ago the story of the man, John Martz, who reached out to him from California. This happened in the mid-90s. Again, my grandfather had spent his entire life thinking everyone in the back of that ambulance had died. And I feel like it was a tremendous gift for him to learn that someone had survived, and it was a true blessing. I also really love the story that my grandmother told me, which is also recounted in what is our history book for Noblesboro, Maine. I'll show you guys a copy here. This was a book that was written in 1988, and this was done in celebration for our bicentennial. And my grandparents both are featured involved in their community. Story that's recounted in here is one that my grandmother had shared with me. My grandmother told me that she and my grandfather were dating before he left for the war, and she decided to send him a Parker pen and pencil set with metal caps for Christmas. When he got that set, he wore it over the pocket over his heart. And thankfully, when he was hit in the chest with shrapnel, the metal pen and pencil prevented the shrapnel from entering his heart. He was sent to an Army hospital to convalesce, and during that time, he wrote home to his brother Floyd and Floyd's wife Lizzie in a letter dated February 22nd, 1945. And I'm going to just read you a short passage from that letter. When I got back to the rest camp, I came to the hospital to let them take some steel out of me. All I've been doing here is writing letters. This war is no fun, though. There's too much grief in it. I lost a lot of my buddies, but they all went down fighting. I learned one thing, and that is rank doesn't mean a thing when you're in a tight spot. It's the one with a little common sense. All I can say is that I thank God that I'm still here today. I've always loved this quote, and I've shared it with my own children over the years when retelling our family history. And I think my granddad encourage the folks here to use their common sense and beyond. And most certainly, he would want them to appreciate the importance of giving back and making an impact on to your country. And I thank you for having us here today.
At this time, we invite the family of Private First Class Roland L. Bragg to join the Honorable Daniel Driscoll, the 18th Airborne Commander, and the Command Sergeant Major, and the Fort Bragg Garrison Commander and Command Sergeant Major for the sign unveiling. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing and singing of the Army song. This concludes our ceremony. We thank you for attending. Airborne all the way.